Chapter 9. Forged in the Furnace. In the early 80s, Kathy and I owned an auto parts store, and we, mostly I, decided to expand our business into 2 other cities. My decision had a disastrous effect on our cash flow to the point that we barely had money to feed our family. Our 3 children were young at the time, and we had strong convictions that they needed a full-time mom at home. This made it impossible for Kathy to work outside the house to help pay our bills, so she set up her desk at home and did all of our accounting and financial oversight while simultaneously taking care of our small children. This was no easy task, but we worked hard and kept growing. Kathy developed into a great CFO for our 4 businesses in 3 locations with 40 employees. Yet the faster we grew, the tighter things became financially, especially at home. I felt as if I was carrying the world on my shoulders. Growing a business from scratch can be agonizing, but developing 3 businesses all at the same time is like a mother having triplets. It will leave stretch marks on you for life. You might forget the pain you were in, but you will never forget the intensity of the labor it took to give birth to your dreams. It takes sacrifice to give birth to anything worthwhile. I remember coming home a little early one night in the midst of one of our toughest seasons. It was wintertime, and it was freezing cold and pitch dark outside. I navigated our steep, snow-covered driveway in our old, faded-out International Scout. When I finally reached the top of the driveway, I peered up at our small chalet and was bewildered that the lights were all off inside the house. I first thought my family was gone until I eyed Kathy's car covered in snow in our driveway. Adrenaline surged through my body as negative scenarios raced through my mind. I slid to a stop on the icy driveway, slammed on the parking brake, and ran upstairs to the deck. I was terrified of what I might see. My heart pounded out of my chest as I apprehensively turned the knob and opened the front door. When I breached the doorway, I eyed our wood stove on the wall opposite me. It was glowing red, and the fire was crackling within. The smell of burning wood filled the room. The rest of the house was completely dark except 2 lanterns that dimly lit the living room just in front of me. The furniture was pushed to the walls, and 3 little tents made out of blankets occupied the room. With my heart still pounding, I yelled, "Is anyone home?" Suddenly, 3 little people stuck their heads out of their makeshift tents and yelled, "Hi, Daddy!" Surprised, I asked, "What are you kids doing?" "We are camping," they proclaimed, laughing in unison. Just then, Kathy rushed into the living room looking alarmed. "What are you doing home so early?" she asked, making her way through the maze of tents and out the front door. She seemed sort of stressed, so I followed her outside, questioning her along the way. "What are you doing?" A second later, she was staring at the electrical panel on the side of the house. "I'm turning the electricity on," she said nervously. Without looking up, she flipped on the master breaker, and the lights suddenly came to life. "What the heck are you doing?" I demanded. "I'm doing what I can to help our family through this lean time," she responded, obviously trying to not make me feel bad. Kathy had budgeted our electric bill by determining how many kilowatts we could use every month. During the day, she would shut the main breaker off to stay within her budget, and then she would turn it back on before I got home so I wouldn't have to live in a dark house. Our kids weren't upset when there was no money because their mother had made a game out of our challenge. To this day, all 3 of my children are very resourceful with money. They didn't learn that from their father. They learned it by watching their mother from the flaps of their little tents as she brought strength to a very tough situation. Not only did our children learn how to be resourceful, but their mother also taught them how to find joy in hard situations, how to live with a positive attitude all the time, and how to work hard for the things we wanted. She continues to demonstrate perseverance to our children and refuses to complain no matter our circumstances. In the face of overwhelming odds, Kathy simply doesn't give up. Consequently, she has become our lighthouse in the midst of storms, the pillar we can hold on to in the strongest winds, and the voice of reason when we are afraid. The process of the potter's wheel. Kathy's attitude is foreign to most of us today. Society longs for a trouble-free life, a magic pill, a euphoric marriage, and the state of constant ecstasy. Many people dream of a perfect world where perfect people live out a perfect life. But the truth is that between the promise of your destiny and the palace of your dreams is the process of the potter's wheel. It is on this wheel that you are fashioned for your destiny and formed for your future. One reason that some refuse to submit themselves to the potter's wheel is that they worship fun. Many people spend their entire fortunes trying to have fun in hopes that pleasure will bring them some great sense of fulfillment. In fact, many believers have confused joy with fun. It may be because we often teach about joy and fun as if words were synonymous. Nothing can be further from the truth. For example, when the Apostle James said, "Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials," he wasn't saying that trials are fun. He is simply reminding us that our outward circumstances should not dictate our inward attitudes. There certainly is nothing wrong with having fun. In fact, I prefer it. But when we make pleasure the goal of our lives, instead of the fruit of some of our activities, we miss out on the joy of sacrifice and the harvest of passion. A spirit-led life isn't always fun, but it always is filled with joy. The obsession people have today with pleasure has destroyed many marriages, devastated countless children, and undermined the purposes of God probably more than any other single addiction. It is often the root cause of divorce, drug addiction, alcohol abuse, gambling, pornography, sex trafficking, and every kind of evil. The truth is, when we walk with God, there are times of pleasure during a life of pure, inherited joy, but it wasn't free. I'm deeply concerned that those who inherited a blessed life through Christ have lost sight of its high cost. I don't doubt our victory, nor do I question our high calling, but I wonder at the lack of resolve that some believers have to engage society at the level of their greatest pain. I grieve over a gospel that is cloaked in benefits, but requires no responsibility. We need to carve out a path through the snake-infested jungles of life and carry the weak back to a place of safety rather than bask in his victory while many nations continue to live in oppression, poverty, and despair. We are God's champions. We aren't called to sit around the palace sipping suds and polishing our armor, nor are we called to hold a spiritual body of Christ building contest competing for the congregation's applause while the world goes to hell. We have been left behind to transform the world. When Jesus said he was finished, he didn't say you were. In fact, when Paul spoke of his apostolic credentials, he unleashed a list of beatings that would have scared Arnold Schwarzenegger. The very man who taught us about great grace was entrenched in a battle that scarred his body and troubled his soul. Yet some believers are convinced that life in the kingdom is like tiptoeing through the tulips. They think they will win the nations through some pool party or beauty pageant. But women and men of radical faith and outrageous courage are forged in the fire of circumstances. They don't shrink back when things get hard. Instead, they press in and increase their intensity. When they see the naive stumbling through darkness, they rise with wisdom to rescue helpless souls. Champions refuse to be moved by the crowd or intimidated by fear. Their loyalty cannot be purchased, and their souls are not for sale. They have dared to leave the cesspool of unrighteous living to embrace a life of dignity and nobility. Overwhelmed. If you walk with radical faith and outrageous courage, you sometimes go through seasons when the mere frequency of things going wrong in your life can be discouraging and overwhelming. One of the worst things that can happen in these seasons is that you begin to expect things to go wrong. Expectation is the fruit of faith. In other words, you believe things are going to go wrong, and therefore you empower destructive outcomes. Simply put, by faith, your life sucks. Of course, all of us have been surprised when something unexpected went wrong in our lives, but it's important that you don't turn bad circumstances into a lifetime of cynicism and subsequently invite a foreboding spirit into your life. Foreboding means an impending sense of doom. It's the feeling that something is always about to go wrong. If you're having a good day, you fear a bad day is coming. Once this spirit grips your soul, you always prepare yourself for the worst so you won't be disappointed. You usually aren't disappointed because you believe and therefore receive a negative outcome. I have watched this negative ecosystem play out in so many people's lives. For example, years ago, I had a woman working for me, I'll call her Mary, who was in a car accident. She was sitting at a stoplight, minding her own business, when a drunk driver plowed into the back of her car. It destroyed her automobile and gave her a terrible case of whiplash. For nearly 2 years, she suffered with severe back pain and migraine headaches. But the worst thing was that Mary began to fear that she would get in another accident. Her fear was extenuated by the fact that she was a victim in the first car accident. This caused Mary to feel powerless to avoid another accident because she didn't do anything to cause the first one. A couple years passed, and just as Mary was starting to feel normal, she got hit again at a stoplight. Not only did the crash re-injure her back, but it also intensified her fear of accidents. Mary worked for me for 5 more years, and in that short time, she was involved in 4 more auto accidents. Do you know what the craziest thing about this was? Not one of those accidents were her fault. I don't mean that Mary blamed her bad driving habits on other people. I'm saying that none of her 6 auto accidents had anything to do with her driving. Yet Mary's fear of another accident caused her to believe that she would crash again. Fear is actually faith in the wrong kingdom. Since she lived by faith, she empowered the kingdom of darkness to torment her. I'm convinced that this is how people jinx themselves. Yet Jesus died to break the curse over our souls and give us abundant lives. I'm not saying that we need to be optimists rather than pessimists, but that we need to be believers. Both optimists and believers manifest positive attitudes, but for very different reasons. An optimist sees the glass half full, but a believer knows it's not the level of the water in the glass that matters as much as whether or not it's being filled or depleted. Therefore, it's the capacity of the resource that determines the condition of life's circumstances. When you walk by faith, you tap into the artisan well of unlimited resources. Believing in Jesus is not a preconditioned mental attitude towards life's circumstances, but the acknowledgement that your temporal conditions are subject to His supernatural power. Therefore, truth overrides the facts because the facts are rooted in the natural laws of creation, while truth is always rooted in the transcending power of the Spirit, which is accessed through faith. Here are 9 keys to breaking the negative ecosystems in your life and embracing faith. Number 1, look for Jesus in the midst of your troubles. He tends to hang out in hard places. Number 2, meditate on God's past miracles and works in your life and not on your tragedy. Number 3, cultivate thankfulness in your heart no matter how you feel. You don't have to give thanks for everything, but know who you are and whose you are, and then you can give thanks in everything. Number 4, avoid the misery loves company syndrome by disciplining yourself to hang around happy people even when you don't feel like it. Number 5, pray in the Spirit because you're building up yourself when you do. Number 6, take a mental vacation every day. Give yourself permission to take a break from thinking about life's challenges and cultivate some happy thoughts. Number 7, remind yourself that these circumstances will not last forever. The Bible frequently says, "It came to pass." In other words, it came so it could pass. This season will end. Number 8, don't forget that everything works out for good in the end. So if it isn't good, then it isn't the end. Number 9, refuse to partner with any thought that doesn't inspire hope, because any thought that doesn't inspire hope is rooted in a lie. You have the mind of Christ, so don't allow any thought in your mind that isn't in His. These are not quick fixes, but ways to process life so that you don't let go of God's promises in the midst of your problems. Take it from Rocky. I enjoy movies that embody the struggle of the human soul for greatness. I think Sylvester Stallone captured this struggle well in Rocky Balboa. I believe it's the best movie in the Rocky film franchise, and it has some of the best dialogue ever scripted. The plot centers on an aged Rocky who wants to make a comeback. Through a series of events, the current boxing champion challenges Rocky to a 10-round exhibition match, but Rocky must first convince the Boxing Federation to license him to fight again. Rocky's greatest test turns out to be his son, Robert, who sees his father as a has-been who needs to hang up his gloves and fade into obscurity. As the camera focuses in on their passionate argument in a Philadelphia back alley, the real issue emerges. Robert begins yelling about living in the shadow of his father's fame. As Robert turns to walk away, Rocky calls him back and begins to tell him about his childhood. "I'd hold you up to say to your mother, this kid's going to be the best kid in the world. This kid's going to be someone better than anyone I ever knew. You grew up good and wonderful, and it was great just watching you. Every day was like a privilege. Then the day came for you to become your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line, you changed. You stopped being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for someone to blame, like a big shadow. Oh, let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean, nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it's not how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody else. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always going to love you no matter what. No matter what happens, you're my son. You're my blood. You're the best thing that ever happened in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't going to have a life. I can't think of a better way to close this chapter except to say that sometimes movies are realistic depictions of truth, and it's the truth that sets you free.